Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin C. Neese.
And I'm Mike Poteet, and you're listening to episode 34, Thy Geekdom Come. We're going to start with some Star Trek news.
And then we'll get into our audience question right after our main story, Thy Geekdom Come. We're going to be talking to Kyle Rudge of Mythos Ink Publishing about their nerdy devotional book series, Thy Geekdom Come, the second volume of which just came out this March 42nd. Check your calendar. It did happen. And then also we're going to talk about some other really cool nerdy things that Kyle is involved with. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. Stay with us. Well, Mike, I feel like I haven't been here for a week.
Well, that's because you haven't, but you...
Oh! Well, good. It's nice to know I'm not going insane.
Your perception of reality is correct, sir.
Good. I can rest in the knowledge of my understanding of where I am in the universe. Yeah, folks, I have to apologize for not having an episode last week. I tried really hard to have one, but stuff was happening in my life. People were in hospitals. Things are okay, but it just took more energy than anticipated to accommodate those things happening. And, life comes first around here. Family comes first. And
absolutely.
But we still love you all. So, Mike, how was your week off?
My week off was good, was less stressful than yours, I think, but has been busy with other things. But I'm excited to be back on the show again. I told you can't get rid of me. You remember that episode of TNG, Cause and Effect, where the Enterprise just keeps blowing up over and over, no matter what they try. I'm afraid, you're stuck in a little bit of a causal time loop with me here.
Last week you're a Quatlu, and this week you're the destruction of the Enterprise.
It just goes from bad to worse. No, it's always a pleasure to be on the show and to talk Trek and faith and the intersection of the two. So I'm excited for this week's episode.
It's great for you to be back. And actually, you were going to be off last week anyway, because I was supposed to be recording with Tim, but that didn't happen. So Tim should be here next week. But as long as things don't go sideways again,
it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. Tim will be back. But anyway, good. I'm glad you're here. And, once again, it's a different episode than we had planned, but here we are. We're
As I told you off the air, have faith. The podcast will unfold as it must.
That's right. Oh boy. So let's see. I think maybe it's been a week. I'm a little off my game, but I think it's time for some Star Trek news.
It is time for Star Trek news. The first news item I've got is not good news. I think it's all going to turn out okay, but Star Trek Discovery has shut down production up in Canada because of some offset COVID-19 exposure. So they're taking a 2-week break, and supposedly the fourth series is still going to premiere in 2021. But to me, this news story is mainly important because it's a reminder the pandemic is not over, as much as many of us, all of us, I suppose, wish it were. Even with the vaccines here and things hopefully looking better on the horizon, we still have to take this thing seriously. And if for no other reason, we got to get Discovery out this year. So
That's right. So please take the pandemic seriously. It's really true. And I've been extremely careful for the past year. And I even am struggling at this point to remember that things are not okay.
It is still bad in lots of places, especially overseas now in India.
Yes. Please be in prayer, folks, for India. If you don't know, right now they're experiencing a resurgence of the virus. They currently are not only leading the world in the prevalence of the virus and the deaths, but it's actually the worst anywhere has been ever. Through the whole pandemic, this whole year, no place at no time has been worse than India is right now. In terms of hospitalizations, deaths, cases, you name it, they're off the charts. So, please be in prayer for India and see what you can do to actually practically support them.
Right.
If there are causes you can donate to or anything like that.
Yeah.
Please do so.
And the people around you too. I remember, to bring it back to Star Trek for a second, when the pandemic first started, there was lots of suggestions, even in the halls of Congress and in Britain, that people, instead of shaking hands, offer each other the Vulcan salute
Yes.
to avoid that physical contact. And I think it's so beautiful because, of course, that gesture came out of Leonard Nimoy's Jewish faith as a gesture of blessing. And he himself said he loved the idea that people were going around blessing each other whenever they'd flashed the Vulcan salute. So let's all be
Yep.
blessings to each other as we get through this pandemic.
That's right. That's right. I'm holding mine up right now. You can't see it.
Absolutely. Same here.
Awesome. So I have another piece of Star Trek news myself. Well, it's sort of, yeah, okay. It's sort of news. It's from Newsweek.
Then it must be news.
Yeah, it says news right in the title.
Right there in the title.
So LeVar, you see at this moment, it's so funny because you see the beginning of the title, and you see LeVar Burton addresses, and I'm like, oh, speculation that he's going to host Jeopardy. No, it's speculation that he's going to return for season 2 of Star Trek Picard, and he really hems and haws through this whole article, which, of course, being LeVar, he does it in a very, a very thoughtful way, but he's still basically hemming and hawing. But I think the most interesting part of the episode is that he says, Burton previously teased a Picard appearance to ET online last year, and I did not know this, so this is news to me. Telling the publication, how do I answer this without getting myself in trouble? I think it is reasonable to think that those people are still a part of Picard's life. Sure, what the hell? Absolutely. You will see us all. Probably not all at the same time. But you never know. You never say never. So I'm like, okay. But he talks earlier in the piece about, how they didn't want to bring TNG people back every week. And I can understand that, but he said, and the article actually even he says, I'm really happy with where Geordi sits in my life. And even though I feel like it would be fun to revisit him now and again, living in his skin every day, I don't necessarily need to go back to doing that. Which, the way things are going right now, with television, I don't think that's going to happen if he comes back for Picard. But he's got to. I mean, pretty much everybody's going to end up coming back.
I certainly hope he will. Especially given that, and I was talking with somebody on Twitter during season 1 of Picard. They said, since when is Picard Data's best friend? I thought that was Geordi. And I don't think the series was saying Picard was Data's best friend, but I thought the person had a point that Geordi, that beautiful friendship between Geordi and Data that they built up through all of Next Generation just went unaddressed in terms of Data's involvement in Picard, the series. So I do hope we'll get to see Geordi again and see how much of that alternate future from All Good Things actually came to pass for him.
All right. Yeah, that would be really
Did he end up with Leah Brahms after all? Is he... What's he doing these days? And of course, LeVar Burton is just such a cool guy. And I'd love to see what he does with that character, with the wisdom he's accumulated himself as a person over the last few decades, and how that reflects in Geordi's character. I think it would be I think it would be well worth revisiting that character.
Shoot, I'd watch a Geordi series.
Yeah. As we've said with Worf too,
yep.
There's just those were some really, really well crafted characters, and they grew to feel so real to us over those 7 seasons of TNG. I think we'd watch series with about any one of them.
That's the truth. That's the truth.
Speaking of LeVar Burton, Kevin, the fan support paid off, and LeVar Burton is going to be hosting Jeopardy the last week of July.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's not been offered the permanent spot as the petitions and all were calling for, but he's going to have the week at the end of July, and who knows, if he does a really great job, who knows where it could go from there. So look for that.
The Newsweek article, actually even calls LeVar the Jeopardy hopeful.
Yes.
So
it's amazing how much mainstream press that idea got once it got out there. I mean,
yeah,
and hundreds of thousands of signatures on the online petitions. I mean, people
signed
really
it.
want to see LeVar Burton behind that podium, and I think he'd be an excellent choice. If you
He'd
listen
be
to his
fantastic.
podcast at all ever, LeVar Burton Reads, you know how thoughtful and literate and intelligent the man is, and
Oh, yeah.
not to mention just the charisma and the presence he has. I think he'd be a super successor to Alex Trebek, and we shall see how things go in July.
I think he really would, and there's something of that, like you said, that intellectual nature, you know, that Alex brought to the show.
Yeah.
That really articulate, you know, and still but gentle and approachable, right? Demeanor. Like that's what you think of when you think of Alex Trebek,
Right.
and it's the same thing you think of. And I guess because I wouldn't have drawn that kind of conclusion, I wouldn't have made that leap to LeVar Burton. But as soon as people said it, it was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it wouldn't have occurred to me on my own either. But the first time I heard it, I thought, oh, he'd be a natural.
Yeah, he'd be great.
He'd have the same gravitas, but I think he'd even be a little more approachable than Trebek, because Trebek, you know, oh, Alex, you know, gosh, he's kind of intimidating, I would think. But I've actually heard he wasn't. I actually worked with two people who were on Jeopardy, and they both said, no, he was very nice and very gracious and not intimidating at all. So
no,
I have to take them at their word.
Yeah, he was a very wonderful human, and I think LeVar is too, and I think I guess it's that sense that people get from LeVar that makes them think that he would be good at the job, which he would be. He'd be great. There are just not a lot of people who have that approachability. But LeVar, yeah, maybe more so because so many of us grew up with him. You know,
right?
both from Reading Rainbow and from
absolutely.
So, you know, we feel like we know him. So it's like, hey, yeah, you know, we need, you know, come on, Granddad, come host Jeopardy. Anyway. Okay. Well, I think that covers our news pieces for this episode. And it is time to bring on our guest. We have a guest, Mike.
I know. I'm excited. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
As have I. This is really cool. So we have with us the business and marketing director for Mythos Ink Publishing. And he's here to talk about Mythos Ink's books, Thy Geekdom Come. He has also, we have found out, planted a geek-affirming church in his lifetime. We're going to ask him about that. Please welcome to the show, Kyle Rudge.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome.
Hello.
Do I need to do like some sort of Star Trek-y, like live long and prosper, kapla? Is there some sort of ritual I need to like shibboleth? I need to show my chops.
Nice. This is going to be a good interview because less than a minute in, the word shibboleth has been used. I'm excited.
You've made Mike very happy.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's great. So, Kyle, tell us a little bit about yourself and about how you got involved with Mythos Ink. What Mythos Ink is.
Ooh. Okay. Well, myself, I am a 39-year-old white geek in Canada. Yeah, and I've got two wonderful kiddos. I've been married for I don't want to say it too loud because I'm going to get it wrong, and my wife would yell at me. So I'm gonna say 15 years, 18 years. I don't know, somewhere in there. I always forget. It's terrible. And yeah, and so I've been in. I didn't realize I was a geek growing up, but I kind of realized that's what I was. And eventually I come down the road. Now I'm the business marketing director of a publishing company, which I co-own with my best friend, Allison Alexander. She's a wonderful human being. And the premise of that was her and I met about 8 years ago, and she was interviewing me she was a journalist at the time, and she had heard about a project that I was working on. And this was I was starting a convention, a small one, a retro video game convention in our city. And we were going to do it for charity. And the charity that we had chosen was a homeless shelter. And so this journalist had heard about the story, had wanted to do a story about what we were doing. And so I was doing the marketing at the time. And so they brought me in to do the interview. And I remember sitting down at a coffee shop, and she's like, well, why are you doing this? Like, why would you choose all this? And I'm like, well, like me personally or the organization? And they're like, well, you personally. Well, for me, I started a small group, and as a small group, we started looking at like the Bible, and we compared it to Firefly. We'd started a small little Bible study around the episodes of Firefly, And it seemed to work out really well because it provoked a lot of really strong conversations about us, about our faith and about our life and about our journey. And we decided to form. And part of that is forming as a small group was we wanted a service component where we actually made a difference in the geek community and benefit. And this is one of our serving opportunities is we found a few people that were interested in building a retro video game convention. So we've come on board to help them run it. And she's like, really? Tell me more about this small group.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And that started a wonderful journey for her and I. And eventually it came down to we found writers across North America. We had a few even in Europe because we wanted to start this geek thing of like, what do we with geeks, we didn't like the shallow conversations that sometimes we would be experiencing within church culture as it pertained to our geek fandoms. It's like, that's not who we are. It's not what we were built to do. We want to talk about the horse and beat it and beat it and beat it until it's long past dead, because that's who we are when we talk about the things that we love. And so what she did was she found writers from across US, Canada, and Europe. And we started talking about these things that we love, and then let our spirituality and our faith play it. How did this make me a better person?
Yeah.
We had a magazine for a few years where all this was. And then eventually we started a publishing company. And through all that we learned through there, that Geekdom Come is one of the results of that. So that's kind of the long, winding journey of all of that.
Well, that's good that you have that whole like cohesive narrative there, of where all this stuff came from.
Can I interrupt for just a second?
Yeah.
I got a text message from my wife. We were married in 2003.
Uh-huh.
I told you, if I talk too loud, she's going to correct me.
That's 18 years this year.
Yeah, it's 18 years this
right.
year.
That's good. That's good.
Good dates to know.
So my wife and I got married in 2001. So the math is always really easy.
Yeah, but it's like, 2003 is just such an odd year. I'm really bad for that stuff.
Well, all right. Well, I'm glad you got that. I'm glad you got that sorted. Thanks to your wife for being a sort of a long distance. I don't know, long distance
On the spot fact checking.
Yeah, on the spot
exactly.
fact checker. I guess we're all long distance. So anyway, that's cool. Well, I tell you, so the first Thy Geekdom Come.
Yeah,
we're here talking about the second book. When did the first book come out?
That would have been, again, dates are not my thing, but I think it was 2019. I'm pretty sure, near the end of the year 2019. Okay,
oh, that's good. And the first one, I notice it says, what is it, like a fan-based devotional?
Yeah. So the first one, we do 42 devotionals, but we've got a variety of categories, right? So there'd be a handful of anime, a handful of video games, a handful of sci-fi, a handful of fantasy, etc. Whereas the new one is just science fiction.
Hence, you're contacting us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Well, and to be honest, I didn't know that you guys existed in the first one, so that's maybe my bad.
That would be because we didn't exist, I think.
There we go.
We came into existence during 2020, so in August of 2020. So
see, something good came out of COVID, right?
That's right. Exactly. That's really true. Yeah. So you were a part of our first season. So welcome.
Wonderful.
That's cool.
I presume it's not by accident there are 42 devotions in these books.
No, it was one of those things of like, well, can we do a 30-day? And it's like, well, how do you not do a 42-day?
Well, I noticed the 42nd in this one was a Hitchhiker's Guide related devotional and thought, that's clever. That's clever.
That would be Allison's handiwork, 100%.
Yes.
It was also, I think, it might have been my idea, but I think it was her idea to release the book on March 42nd. So that would have been April 11th. So.
Very nice. There's layers upon layers.
That's brilliant. Well, I did see that on the website. I was looking on the website and it said March 42nd on the thing, and I was like, that can't be right. That's crazy. I've got to email them right now and let them know that there's an error on
Oh,
their
you're one of
website.
those people, Kevin.
Oh yeah,
you
well, I'm
just
an
can't,
editor, man.
You just can't let it lie.
Well, I'm an editor and I'm also a writer, and like I know if I have a mistake, I want somebody to point out. So
I'm one of those
I'm
people too. So
yeah. So I was like, oh man, I got to fix it. I got to tell them because it's got to be 24th, and I was opening an email, and all of a sudden it would have been a 40-second. Oh, jeez.
So the marketing worked. I'm good with that.
Did. But see, I did not space it out to figure out April 11th. I thought it was a clever way of saying March 24th.
Interesting. Okay, fair enough. That's good to note. I'm gonna put that in my marketing book.
If you put April 11th in parentheses, that would have really worked.
I think in some of our ads, I'm not sure if all of them, but it did say like in parentheses, you do the math. So
I saw that. Yeah. See, that's good marketing.
Nice,
You're
that's
attracting your target audience and repelling the rest. So
well, and marketing tip, right? This allows somebody to interact with the ad, so they have to pause and think about it to factor that in, which solidifies it more in their brain to remember it after. So, yeah,
there you go.
That's why I do that for a living.
Brilliant.
Nicely done. So tell us a little bit about why you wanted to do a book of devotionals as was this your company's first publishing project, this series?
This was one of our first publishing projects. So Allison and I, when we had worked together as part of a different organization that we had started, we had done that magazine. It was called Area of Effect. And it was kind of like articles. So they weren't devotionals, but they weren't unspiritual either. And so she came to me just as at the part of the transition where we were leaving and moving on from that organization to start a publishing company. And she came to me and she's like, I kind of want to write a devotional. I kind of feel like that's what we need to do. And my response to her was, well, I hate devotionals. and so you've got a lot of convincing to do. And so this needs to be something that I would be interested in. And so we really unpacked that statement of like, well, why do I hate them? And it isn't the content. Like, it isn't like I hate doing devotionals, even though I'm terrible at it, if I'm fully honest. But it's more that I always found them to be on the shallow side.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like we get that serves a purpose, but it didn't serve any purpose for me. And so I just didn't like them. And so I said, well, we need something that has a little bit more meat, that is willing to go deeper, and that isn't just a 5-minute read and walk away, but is something that I have to really wrestle with and be okay with that, to not necessarily have answers to it. And so she set out. And so we already had all of these writers and across. And the other thing too is that I wanted it to be ecumenical, because I have found in several devotionals that I've experienced in the past that they have their slant, which is fine. Like if it's a charismatic slant, it's a charismatic slant. But I don't always want to drink the same cup of tea. And I like seeing different perspectives and seeing things from a new angle.
Awesome.
If I may tell a really fun story,
please do.
This was for work. They sent me off to Pennsylvania, so I was working in Pennsylvania for my day job, and we had a couple of writers. We had one in Pennsylvania and we had one in New Jersey. And I decided, I was like, hey, I'd love to meet you in person. We've only ever talked on email. Can we meet someplace? And the best part was the town that was between the three of us, where we all were, that was equidistant, was Intercourse, Pennsylvania. So I'm like, well, we have to go there. We have to go there. Yep. And so we went, and it was Jen, who is a Catholic, and we have Rob, who is an Anabaptist theologian, and then myself, which is just a mishmash of you name it, a mutt. And it was really fun. It was really fun to talk about things like differences of baptism and differences of like, well, what do Catholics believe about this? And one of the fun things was that conversation about baptism was the Anabaptist, or the Catholic, was saying, I really admire what you guys do for baptism, because infant baptism, we talk about what it means and all the rest. It's like, but this idea of choice, there's something powerful about that, and attaching that to the person. She's like, I envy that in what you do, and I think there's something beautiful in that. And then Rob, the Anabaptist theologian, he's like, yeah, but there are some problems with it, because at what age are they available to make that decision? Because that age, is it 18? Is it 13? Is it 8? Is it 4? What if the person has cancer and they're 7 years old and they want to be baptized? Do you say no? And he's like, and then on top of that, what if they're not mentally of the age, but they're physically of the age? Does that factor into it? He's like, there's a whole bunch of gray area that makes it real messy. I envy infant baptism, because that one's easy. You just do it. And it was really fun just to see this love for each other's faith weaving through. Yeah. And I wanted to see that reflected in the Bible study, in the devotional, so that even though I wouldn't consider myself Catholic, when I read a Catholic's writing, there is something beautiful and holy in there that I can take from it, because I had never seen it from that perspective before. So that was very important to me for the devotional.
Well, and you've got a Catholic book in the lowercase c sense, universal and spanning the whole spectrum of faith expressions. And I wanted to know how you found these writers. How did you put out the call? Because I missed it, and I would have loved to. But how did you go about recruiting your devotional writers?
So for the first one, we used the ones that we had worked with in the magazine, and we had found them just through word of mouth. Like there was several Facebook groups that I was a part of, and like one would lead to another. And honestly, we're this weird ragtag bunch that I don't know if I could trace our origin, but we all know each other now, and there's this weird community around it. And then in the second one, we decided to open up, and so we did connect with a few of the Christian geeky ministries just to let them know that this was open, and some people started. And we did get a few people into the Thy Geekdom Come community that way. But hopefully in the future, now you know. So, and then I can stop writing the Star Trek devotionals.
When volume 3 comes around, you make sure you tell us.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. That's really great. Why? So speaking of Star Trek, since this is,
absolutely
Star Trek show. Hey, tell us about your relationship to Star Trek. Why is it that you always write the Star Trek entry?
I find so most of the circles that I run into, they're more the future fantasy types of enjoying like Star Wars and Firefly, and I do enjoy them myself as well. But growing up, when I remember watching Voyager and Deep Space Nine. Those are my first 2 introductions to Star Trek. And I loved it. Like, I was just blown away by it. And then I went back, and then I ended up watching TNG, and then a little bit of the original series. That was hard to go back to, not gonna lie. And
hey now.
Mad respect for it, but I didn't start
that
there.
Catholicity we're striving for.
I didn't start there, so it was like, okay.
I tease.
And so just with me, like I found a lot of joy, and I think Deep Space Nine is probably where my real heart is at. So just this idea of as we talk about like this engaging of faiths and religions and the interaction between all of them. I mean, you have, right? There's very few episodes really encounter that, as well as the entire series of DS9, how faith, politics, and culture weave together in beautiful and horrendous ways. So that caught me, and I loved it. So,
yeah. Well, that's beautiful, and it's interesting to talk, as somebody who grew up as a TNG kid, TNG and original series movies, like original crew movies. It's interesting to talk to people who came to Star Trek later in its life, who came to Deep Space Nine first, who came to Voyager first, who came to Enterprise first. It's really interesting to see how people's first Star Treks affect them and influence them. How did you feel like when you're watching? And this is kind of a tangent, but how did you feel when you're starting out as a Voyager Deep Space Nine kid, as you go back and watch the previous series? Did you feel like you were watching things get like clunkier and less well developed, or what was your experience?
As somebody who's watched a lot of TV and film, so I remember the first season of TNG. There was definitely some writing and acting challenges where that's typical for a first season. But
Yes.
what is this series, right? Like that's always one of those big questions. And after that time span between the original series and TNG, like that's a big question of whether or not this is going to succeed. And then going back to the original series, that felt like I had something so foreign to me because it was so much different and so old, so much older to it. I think there was the one episode in Deep Space Nine where they go back in time
Trials and
to that Trials and Tribulations, and that one gave me a bit of respect. I really enjoyed the interplay in that one. But now even with Discovery and how that still kind of plays with some of the original series discussions and timeline and people and uniforms, I'm really interested in I have a newfound appreciation for it now.
That's good. Yeah, I feel much the same way. I mean, I didn't have a lot of good memories of the original series as I was growing up, even though I love the original crew movies. And so going back and seeing the original series later in life, there are a lot of things to appreciate, but then there are a lot of places where you go, yeah, we've grown a lot since then. And, and as you should, especially at this point when you're looking back, as much as 55 years, it's been a long road. Cue music.
I've got it going in my head.
Yeah. Who doesn't? Yeah.
Well, and the other Star Trek devotional in the piece does that. Robert White's Solomon's Method to Live Long and Prosper, which is a devotional take on Amok Time. He mentions how the episode does objectify women, and he says that was, I'm paraphrasing, but an episode of its time, and yet he still manages to find good in that episode and something to meditate about, the power of friendship and the power of loyalty to one another. So it's good to be able to sift the wheat from the chaff in the older stuff and the new stuff for that matter.
Even when we were writing our magazine, that was one of the things we wanted to stray away from, because it's really easy as geeks for us to just complain about everything. Like, this isn't what I would do. This isn't what I, like, oh, that's not who I would cast. And we hated that negative space of just dwelling in the things we didn't like. And so we made an active commitment to say, we just want to find something that we love and find the holy in it and not worry about everything else. It isn't about that. There is, and the reference that we went to, like, because Jesus was wonderful in that, where he would talk to the Pharisees and the Sadducees and he'd be like, you brood of vipers, you would go twice around the world or halfway around the world to make them twice the sons of hell as you are. Like, he's just like, he's got some real scathing words. But then he would turn to the crowd and be like, yeah, but listen to them, because they still have something to teach you about me. And it's like, so if the sons of hell have something to teach me about who my Jesus is, then maybe I can listen to somebody who doesn't share the same denomination as me.
You think?
Maybe there's something holy in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's really good. And I think I love that there's diversity in your collection. I mean, to sort of plug my own work a little bit, this book that I just finished editing, or well, actually I finished editing it a while ago, but that just came out, The Good, the True, the Beautiful, tribute to Dr. David K. Noggle, who's my mentor. We worked really hard at that too. In that book, was making sure that there was a lot of diversity represented. I mean, we're all students of Dr. Noggles. We're all people who love his worldview and his influence on our lives, love him. But we've all taken those things and moved in different directions. And I feel like there's something to be said for the centrality, or the essential nature, if you will, of ideas, if you can show that people can gather around those ideas from a variety of places and in a variety of ways. And so really appreciate that you're doing that in your work as well. I think it's not just, an accessibility feature, because I mean, we talk about nerds and Christian devotions. You're in a pretty narrow band already. Right?
You don't say.
So yeah, it's not the time to be shutting up the doors of heaven in people's faces. But it's also, I think it gives you that, because you have, I think that extra thread, that extra thing that you're gathered around, which is nerding. I think it gives a lot of space for all these varieties of Christian experience and perspective to come to the table. And I find that fascinating. That's a Julian Bashir quote, by the way, from when he was on Next Generation. I think it was The Quality of Life. But anyway, so I find that fascinating that you can bring all those voices together. How have you found that interplay when you go through and look at the book itself as a whole? Do you feel pretty satisfied that you accomplished that, at least from a theological or a doctrinal angle?
I do. One of the things that we had wanted to do was to not only find that ecumenical perspective of bringing in well-educated and well-written and Christian and nerdy people. Like, that's a really small pool already. And like we're making it smaller. And then we bring them all in. But then we also had another group of essentially theology checkers of, sometimes people phrase things in their own denomination and that's a norm, but in another, that's not okay. And here's why. And so it went through so many different revisions to ensure that, so the Free Methodist found this in here, whereas the Baptist found that. Oh, okay. So where can we find something that we can both find, like, as a common ground that is still holy? And so it's one of those things of, like, because you have so many writers, because you have so many perspectives, and because you then have so many theological fact checkers, like, there is so many edits and revisions that go through in here. I do not envy Allison's job, who edits it. So I just got to sell it. That's my thing. So it's easy for me to believe in it.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating, and that's a great thing to know that you have that. How do you find those people to do that sort of oversight?
Well, we've had a lot of really great connections. And so, for instance, one of the, like, I attend two churches. One is the Geek Church, but we also attend another church on Sunday morning. And at this particular church, it's the type of church where, so my wife has 2 university degrees. I've got my university degree. We are below the median in terms of educational, at that church. Like, there are several different professors of several different universities. Because of our work with other universities, we've been now in contact. Like, there's, we got the dean of the dean of William Catherine Booth College of the Salvation Army. We've got, various, like, biblical theologians, and it's just like one leads to the other. And so we just have this vast pool of people who are very, very educated and very bought into the project. And some of them aren't really geeks. They just love reading it, where they go through and they're like, yeah, I don't need to know Star Trek in order to really feel something out of this devotional. And that makes us feel good as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's an important thing to go for. And that's something that I strive for, I hope at my best in my work, to be able to do that, to be able to make things accessible to people who are outside of that. I even did a thing called a non-Trekkies reading guide for my first book, to try to bring those people in, not just bring them in, but to help people see that it's accessible to them, whether they have. And I found it was interesting. I read the She-Ra devotional.
Yes.
And as a She-Ra fan, I just want to thank you for putting that in there. That's great. I love that series a lot, and I really was struck by her talking about some of the things that we talk about on this show a lot, which is people who have felt sort of, I don't know, disenfranchised is an overused word, but people who have felt sort of worn out or deceived, or have really been hurt and traumatized by experiences in religious environments. and really speaking to those people, and as one of those people, you know. I thought it was great to have voices like that in there, and she takes a pretty personal approach to a specific story. And I think that's one thing that the book brings that a lot of devotionals don't have. That's sort of part of that sort of what was the word you used to describe most devotionals? Surface level, simplistic. Shallow is the word. Yeah. I think there's a reason that comes up, and that's because, you know, you get shallow when you try to be generic. But one of the things that one of my heroes, Fred Rogers, used to say is that which is most personal is most universal. And so I think it's a real strength that you include that personal angle, at least in some of the ones that I read. Was that something that you encouraged in your writers, or did that just sort of come forth?
For sure. There was a time, I think it was my wife's 30th birthday? I can't remember, but I remember.
There you go with the numbers again.
Yeah, totally. Right. Terrible. I flew. I at the time, I was a journalist at the time. I was working in radio, and I abused my media credentials as much as I could. And I flew us out to Toronto, and there was Fan Expo. It's a massive convention. And so we got to go behind the scenes on a lot of this and got to talk to a lot of the people. And so my wife got to meet some of the people that she loved, like Summer Glau from Firefly. And it was a really great experience. But along the way, I also got access to some of the media only interactions with some of these people. And one of my favorite ones was sitting at the Marvel Comics one. And I'm not a big comics guy. Like, I do enjoy comics, but I'm not like some of those people that just like they've had comics since they were 4 and they have stacks and stacks. That's just not me. But it was really interesting to hear from the CEO and then the editor of Marvel Comics. And it was fun because there was like 6 of us journalists there, and 5 of us were clearly geeks and wanted this assignment, and the 6th one was just asking very generic questions. But there was one of the 5 of us that really wanted to be there, and he's like, "Can I ask like a personal question?" And they're like, "Yeah, absolutely." He's like, "I've always been kind of interested in writing for Marvel. What do you look for in a writer that you would hire or that you would be interested in?" And I remember the CEO looking over at the editor and says, "Well, this is your ballpark." And so he steps up and he's like, "Honestly, at Marvel, we want our stories to change lives, to make a difference, to make a positive impact in somebody's life. If you can tell a story that connects with somebody so deeply that their life is forever changed because they read that story, it's less about how many people read it, whether it's 100 or 100,000, and more about lives being changed. Those are the types of stories that I'm looking for, because those are the types of stories that people remember and for years and years and years. So if I only sell 100 copies, that's fine, but I will sell however many more, because they're looking for more of those same stories and they trust us to go out and find them." And it was like you could hear this like pin drop in the room. And for me, I'd never wanted to write comics, but in that moment, that was all I wanted to do with the rest of my life, because he was so passionate and he believed so strongly in this, and it meant so much to him. And so with our writers, we really want that, like, just share with me your genuine passion. If you talk to me about something you're passionate about, there will be 30 seconds to a minute that is just holy. I want that minute. That's the minute I want you to share, because then it doesn't matter if I'm not into comics. It doesn't matter if I'm not into Star Trek, but I can witness something holy and be moved by it with you.
That's super beautiful. And I mean, I think that has so much to do with why we're here, you know, why we're doing this show, why it exists, why I write the books I write, you know, and do the work that I do, because I think we love the things we love for a reason. We don't just enjoy stuff because it's fun. And I really have long struggled with this idea. I mean, there are always financial considerations, and there are always business interests at play when you're talking about things like motion pictures and you're talking about comic books. But even when you're talking about novels or anything else that's produced to be sold, there's always that aspect to it. But I've felt like the Christian community in particular has had a tendency to say, oh, everything Hollywood does, they love to talk about Hollywood, like they know anything about it, and say, well, everything that they do is all about greed, and it's all about money, and they don't care, and they have no morals, and they have no ethics. They don't care about people. All they want is money, 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 and they'll do anything they can to get it, and sex sells, so that's what they'll put on the screen and all that. And I've just never you see some of that, but I've never, in my background of, I set out to be a filmmaker, from when I was a kid. So, in my background of being around people in movies and television and things, I don't find that to be the case at all. Most of the time, most people who make films and television and comic books and whatever it is they make, they do it because they love it. And they do it because they have stories they want to tell, and they want to connect with other people in a particular way. And I just think we sell ourselves short. And I feel like that's one of the other things that happens in this genre, and where we sort of strip mine a work of art to get what we want out of it, because we really feel like there's nothing of value going into it to begin with, because people think, oh, it's all greed and it's all money and it's all just this product. But if we're going to watch it, at least let's try to figure out, how to, say something spiritual about it. And I like things that go deeper and that are more respectful of work than that. I mean, I have to be really careful, because here we are. We just spent 2 episodes, one talking about Spock as a Christ figure and one talking about Data as a Christ figure, and you want to talk about things that, and next week we're doing Cisco as a Christ figure. Well, except in the case of Cisco, you want to talk about things that are not intentional. You want to talk about things that, people don't have a particular spiritual bent going into it. We definitely tread into that territory, but I try to do it carefully and respectfully, and that is in keeping with the beauty of the art as it's presented. So I like that you're taking that perspective and putting it to work. I was trying to, yeah, I was trying to learn a little bit more about Mythos and Ink generally, because I feel like Thy Geekdom Come are the 2 projects that I can see in your repertoire that strike me as specifically Christian projects. And do you have a broader scope as a publishing company in general?
Yeah, so we do speculative fiction, and our desire is for stories that do push us to, in that same way of the Marvel story, right? Mm-hmm. That if somebody read this, there is a deep visceral reaction in my soul that I am moved by this. Mm-hmm. So that means, though, that it isn't just about Christianity, and so we do publish sci-fi and fantasy. We don't call ourselves a Christian publisher, and not even all of us that are on staff would call themselves Christian. But we also acknowledge that within the Christian tradition, there is an opportunity to develop art that is beautiful. And so we kind of play with that. So we do have our Area of Effect series, which is, if you go back in the story where we were talking about the Area of Effect writing and the magazine, that's kind of the intellectual property that we took from there. We've transitioned. And so those are not as Christian-y as a devotional, but they are very spiritual, and 95% of them would be written by pretty devout Christians. And the idea is that here's something that I love, here's where I found something that was holy in it. And they may or may not use the specific Christ language. Whereas in the devotional, we're very explicit about that stuff. But yeah.
How have you found that, like, as you've gone forward as a company, and living in those in between spaces, how have you found your reception, regarding your very specifically Christian work and less so specifically Christian work? Are you finding a pretty broad reception?
We always do get that question too, especially from people that would be in marginalized communities, and which is fair, right? The Christian church has not always been kind to those on the margins, but we recognize that, and so we try to let our reputation precede us and be honest about that. So if I were to go back into kind of like the geek church that we have, that was one of the big questions too, which was how do we live this out? Like we interact with geeks who are on the margin, but there are many on this margin that are here. Geek culture drew people from all of the margins. We were outcasts. We were unclean in society. There's a large population of LGBTQ people in the geek community. There is a large population of those with mental disabilities, or those on the spectrum, or those, because they are all the outcasts, and we all congregated together and found these things that we love together. And so being honest about who I am, but also holding that with an open hand of saying, this is mine. And I want to, I don't want to throw this in your face, but I want to sit and listen to you. What do you have to teach me about my God? Well, I'm not a Christian. I don't care. That doesn't matter to me. You are still, like, if I truly believe that you are made by God, you have that fingerprint of God on you, you have something to teach me that I don't know, and I want to know. And that's all. And I have found that just that sitting and that listening develops some incredibly beautiful friendships. And so that same sort of attitude when we now have a company is that same front of like, no, it's okay. We talk about and we're honest about where we are, but we don't hold that as a hammer toward people, but instead hold it as something that is precious to us, but we yearn for others to play with. And we let that play out and see what happens. And it's been a fun journey along the way to try and shake some of those perceptions of Christians being mean.
Do you think geeks and nerds in particular have a proclivity toward that kind of thinking? In terms of wanting to share things with other people who are different from them and get a different perspective or a different idea about them?
Yes and no. So I would say probably about 5-10 years ago is when geeks started to become popular. And it was interesting to see the gatekeeping at that time, right? Because there were the OG geeks and then there were the new geeks. And that was a real trying time because we were bullied for so long that suddenly we became the bully. It's like, no, you can't love this thing. Right. You didn't read the original material. You're not a real fan. Shut up. They loved it. It's fine. And so it's interesting that we found this community around tragedy, but when we were suddenly placed in the forefront, it was very easy for us to suddenly become gatekeepers and keeping other people out. And so it's a yes and no. There's this yearning, but there's also this sinister side that we also experience in community.
Well, and I think that's so true of Christian culture. Certainly, from a historical perspective, speaking of a community over generations, as though it has one mind and one sense of being, but in very broad strokes, Christian community comes from being an oppressed community, comes from being an outcast community. And then as history goes on, they begin to take on the Christian culture often begins to take on the role of the one who is doing the casting out and the one who is doing the oppressing. And we see that continue, even into contemporary times. And that's why so many of us are so hurt and so harmed, by our church background or our Christian background, if we have one, or don't have that because we've stayed away from it because it seemed so, like you say, mean. And I think that's a real tragedy. But maybe that's part of human nature. Maybe we should perhaps, while we recognize that it's wrong and try to fix it, perhaps see that less as a specific flaw of religion or a specific flaw of Christianity, and more say that is a flaw of humanity that comes through anytime humanity builds something. And it's really easy to lay that stuff at the feet of religion. It's really easy to lay that stuff specifically at the feet of Christianity because it's so visible and because it comes through in such a strong way. And it's so deeply hypocritical. It's so deeply internally inconsistent for those things to happen. And yet we have to recognize that I think perhaps, and I'm speculating here, but I think I'm right. You guys can tell me. But I kind of feel like if our perspective might shift a little bit, our understanding might shift a little bit, we might be able to find a little more grace to give one another and a little more room to give God a chance, even when religion fails us. If we recognize that that's not necessarily religion itself or necessarily Christianity itself, and certainly not God failing us, but it's human frailty coming through the things that humans have built. Does that seem fair?
I think so. And can I make a nice segue to that?
Please do.
Because that links to the devotional that I wrote in the Geekdom Come 1, as we talk about the other, and it was titled, "Would You Baptize an Android?"
Nice.
Because that came into the conversation of, I remember at the time attending an evangelical church, a very popular, loudspeaker, high-end show production. We had been there for 10 plus years. And this idea of, would you baptize an android? And instantly, people will laugh and be like, oh, okay. But if I actually asked a pastor and was serious about this question, they would say, well, no, they're a robot. They're a machine. No. And that parallel of this idea of they're the other. And so we don't let them in here. We don't understand them. They're not one of us. They're not. And it was interesting to have this question, because that led me down the road of okay, well then why wouldn't you baptize an android? And so it was fun to talk to various pastors about, well, these are the reasons why, right? They don't have a soul. They're not alive. They're not human. They're man-made. And we would go through, and they would have this whole litany of various excuses as to why they wouldn't. And then I would then pause it and I say, well, they said the same thing about Black people and why they wouldn't be baptized in a white church. They were less than. They weren't really human. They didn't have souls. That's a common thing.
Yeah.
And they said the same thing about people who were gay, people who were divorced, people who were, and all of these types of questions came up. Is that okay? Now, would you baptize an android? Well, I'm still not sure if they have a soul. And I'm like, but what if they do and you say no? And then what if they don't and you say yes? What's the consequence here?
Right.
And then on top of that, what does that say to the community? That there's a chance that you don't have a soul, so I'm not willing to take it and I will not baptize you, versus there's a chance that you may, so I lovingly will. What does that say to your community and to the people that are around you?
Yeah. Boy, I think that's profound, and I think it's beautiful. And it's so important to hang on to that idea. I think when you talk about that choice, right? Okay, what if they do have a soul and you don't baptize them? What if they don't have a soul and you do? What's worse, right? I think so often we get caught up in whether or not we might be violating a religious rule. In terms of well, it's not okay to, pull the ox out of a hole, because we don't want to work on the Sabbath, right?
Right.
And missing, and Jesus talked about this, quite a bit, missing the point, missing the spirit of the law, as you will, if you will, and missing, what I generally refer to as the law of love. That really supersedes all. Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. The whole of the law and the prophets hang on these two things. Basically do these things and you're fulfilling the law. It doesn't matter about all the rest as long as you hold true to that. And so often, we talked earlier about essential ideas. So often we lose sight of that. Because it's there's this rule here in this verse, see, that says yada, yada, yakety, schmackety. And so that says that this kind of situation means we act this way. But if we look not at the situation on the page, but we look at the situation that we are living in, and we think clearly and carefully about the human consequences of our actions, is it really so bad that we don't do what it says on the page in this instance if it serves love better? What's the consequence if we do what it says on the page, but it doesn't play out in real life the way it might have played out, when those words were written? And looking at the actual consequences of an action and the actual cost that we're weighing, what actually happens? What is the bad thing of opening up fellowship with this person who is considered other? What's really wrong with that? To tell somebody to say, God loves you exactly as you are. And that love is available to you right now, exactly as you are. You don't have to do a thing to earn it. What's wrong with saying that to someone? Because the alternative is to say, you're not good enough, you're not worthy, go away. And the only person Jesus ever says that to, the only person God ever says that to, is people who worship him in vain. Those are the only people who ever get that treatment. So I think we need to be very careful that we're not those people worshiping in vain. So I think that's beautiful. I'm riffing, but but that's beautiful. Talk to us a little bit about, we haven't covered specifically your Star Trek devotional in the second book, which is the one that we're kind of is the impetus for us being here, the one that's out right now, that released on March 42nd.
You want to talk about the passion speech?
Yes,
because it's going to get there.
Yes, get there. We like to preach every now and again on the show.
So I will make a provocative statement, but I will defend it. So my provocative statement is that I truly believe that the second season of Discovery is the best written season of science fiction of all time.
Wow.
Well,
and I mean,
but Spock has a beard, sir.
And I am a big fan of Battlestar Galactica. My son has Hilo in his name. I am a big fan of Firefly. My son also has Hoban, and my daughter has River. Like,
You're in for a penny, you're in for a pound, man.
This is the weight in which I am making this claim, and it's okay if people disagree with me. But here's why I feel that is the greatest. There's this one scene in it where, because if we're coming off of the first season it was fun because the captain was the bad guy.
Yeah,
right.
Which I thought was a really fun twist, because because everything in all of the other Star Treks, it all revolves around the captain, right? It was always about that person.
Yeah.
And so this one, it wasn't about them, and they were the villain. And so you have this crew that has been through hell. Like, it has not been okay. And there is PTSD. There is some real issues going on. And then suddenly the Federation's like, by the way, you got a new captain. We're assigning you a new one. And I love that they didn't just let that go. Like, they didn't like him. He's this outsider. And there's this, we just experienced the shared tragedy, and it has drawn us closer. We are a band of brothers, right? That moment. And suddenly there's this new person into the mix. And Pike walks in and he names it. He says exactly, he's like, I get it. You've been through junk. This hasn't been good. And then, and he says, okay. And then he sits down and he gives his first order. Before he does, and this is why I found this such profound writing. He says, I want you to sound off, names only, your ranks don't matter. We'll start with you.
Come on.
And they begin to give their names and what they do. And he goes through bang, 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 all the way around. And then he, and what I loved about that is the meta of that, right? There's so many bridge officers that aren't named, and all of that. So there's that. That's why I love the writing of it, of like, no, every person on this bridge has a story worth telling. And why I think it's the best written season is because they told every one of those stories, and they were so moving in so many ways. That being said, he goes through and then he issues his orders by giving them their name, their first name. And he goes back memorizing their names. And from a captain standpoint, there's this moment of, I know your name. You are not a rank to me. You are not some subordinate to me. You have a name and a story, and that matters to me. And he sits in that chair and commands such authority in that moment that I'm like, wow, everybody on that bridge distrusted him and then suddenly felt seen, heard, and understood.
Yes.
And his first action, his first mission is they detect this ship in a precarious way, and there happens to be human life form. Well, we're going to get that. We're going to get that person. And there's the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And he's like, yes, but it's one. And that one has a name, and that one matters.
Yes.
You want to build trust in your crew. That one matters. And so I had to write a devotional about this moment of, I believe that I have a God that knows my name. I am not some number, but I know that he knows me. And then there's that story of leaving the 99 to go and get the one. That is the God that I believe in.
Yes.
And that is the captain that I want to serve.
Yes.
And so I wrote a devotional about that.
You can't see my hand, but it's up. Amen. You're absolutely right. I think that's bang on. And I think it's a specifically and very truly Christian concept, a very Christian idea to say, I respect you and I want to hear from you and I want to know your name because God knows your name. I want to care about you because God cares about you. One of the catchphrases that keeps coming back on our show is something that Natalie, David's wife, said way back, and that he relayed to me, I think on the first show that he did as a guest, and that was, how can you love your neighbor if you're not willing to listen to their story? And I think a lot of Christian culture, or a lot of the sort of the Christian project as it has been laid out and carried out in our contemporary culture, has been very much not wanting to listen to anyone's story, not wanting to know anybody's name or where they come from. That it's all kind of about the hard sell, and it's all about, well, here's what I say, and here's how you need to change, and here's what you need to do better, and here's what's wrong with you, and don't you want this thing that I've got to fix what's wrong with you? And the other person is like, but you don't even know me. How are you telling me what's wrong with me? How are you telling me, what I need to do to fix my life? You just met me. And, it's that difference between the original series and Deep Space Nine, let's say, or the original series and Next Generation. The idea, I think Mike Pillar talked about this, that the original series was, we're kind of going out and teaching, all the different species, all of our great ideas. And in Next Generation, and I think also in Deep Space Nine, even perhaps more so in Deep Space Nine, we're going out and we're learning. And I think that's so important, the idea of learning. Another thing that Dr. Noggle instilled on all of us was the idea of lifelong learning, of continuing to always learn in the whole of life, not just in some academic setting, not just in a church building or what have you, but learning in the whole of life. And that requires a great deal of humility. And I think we lack that. So great, beautiful. I think that's a beautiful moment. I don't know if it quite makes the case for the entire season being the best science fiction ever, but it's cool. I understand the spirit of the hyperbole, so it's good.
Well, it helps me make sense of why there was such intense fan demand for a Captain Pike series. This Captain Pike, I mean, people liked Bruce Greenwood's Captain Pike in the Kelvin movies. I liked him quite a lot.
Oh yes,
and
wonderful.
Jeffrey Hunter has his admirers, but man, this Pike Anson Mount brought to the screen. Yeah, like you said, Kyle, I want someone like that in my life who knows my name, will listen to my name, listen to my story. Perhaps it's not an accident that the name Christopher means Christ bearer, because he conveys that Christ-like presence to his crew. And I think viewers saw that and said, yes, give us more of that, please. And they wouldn't all be able to articulate it as well as you have here and in your devotional, but that could be a stirring of the spirit.
You're reminding me, Mike, and this is something that I've kind of thought about. Pike, as a real symbol of a Christian captain. He's not the only one, but I mean that in the sense of being a Christ-like captain, or a kind of captain in the sense that as a Christian should be. There was, back in the early days of Enterprise, this article, and I can't remember if it was the Onion. I think it was the Onion. Yeah. And it was this article that was a satirical article claiming that Jonathan Archer was going to be Star Trek's first Christian captain. And the way he was going to be a Christian captain was, we're going to go out, into the galaxy, and we're going to, spread the good news, spread the gospel. And if the aliens don't accept, we're just going to blow them out of the sky. And
ouch.
and over the years, and I don't want to denigrate anybody who I've spoken with. I know everybody has been very sincere in what they've shared with me, and we're all in different places in our journey. I don't want to say anything bad about anybody, but I have over the years had people say, hey, what if they made a Christian Star Trek? And and have said something like that. Not exactly like that, but just basically like, we're going to go out and share the gospel. And it always has struck me just very, very wrong, that would be the Christian way to make Star Trek. And I think a much more Christian way to make Star Trek, or to be Star Trek, is the kind of Star Trek we see under the captaincy of Pike. And I think that, that is something that is going to be loved, and that's going to be well received, because, the Christian story and the Christian ethic at its best speaks to the best of who we are, demonstrates the best of who we are. And I think that's what Pike does. And so I think it's great that you draw that out in your piece. I think it's beautiful.
I appreciate that.
So, Kyle, before we let you go, you've mentioned a couple of times this geek church that you helped plant and nourish. And I'm certainly intrigued by that. I do some preaching occasionally, and I preach at the congregation my wife pastors every now and then, and I've been told, yeah, I always look forward to hearing Mike preach because he's going to mention something geeky. And I don't think I do that every time, but for sure I've guilty as charged trying to work in the geeky sermon illustrations when I can, but I sense this is something more and deeper than that you're talking about. So please tell us about what it means for your community to be a geek affirming church.
Well, the idea started, it was funny because I remember this was a weird time. I had somebody contact me and they said, hey, I'd like to meet and talk about the project you're working on with our small group, et cetera, et cetera. And we're just kind of doing service projects and, raising funds, et cetera, et cetera. And he's like, kind of want to meet with you and have coffee and talk about what's going on. It's like, okay, whatever. And I said, yes. And I had forgotten about it. And it was a gentleman by the name of Jared Siebert. He's a Canadian in Saskatchewan. He had flown out to Winnipeg in part to meet with me. And it's funny because he calls me on the days like, so are we meeting for coffee? I'm like, I don't even remember booking this date. So bad at that. So yes. And so I went into this meeting, and one of the things that I had always met was that when people would meet with me about geek stuff is that it would either go one of two ways, right? There's that they're either in love with geek culture or they want to tell me how wrong I am. And inevitably, like, all of these conversations, when you're on that higher level, that's where they revolve around. It's one or the other. And I didn't have time to stalk this guy on Facebook to figure out where he stands. So I meet with him at Starbucks and we sit and it's a weird dance because there's always that like superficial kind of conversation. And I'm trying to figure out where's this guy stand? Where is this going to go? And we talk about the shibboleths of geek culture, right? Like, so you kind of throw something out there.
Uh-huh.
And it was fun because very quickly he recognized immediately what I was trying to do. And he's like, oh, no. It's like, no, I love what you were doing. I love geek culture. I love to see what this is. And I am just intrigued at the success that you are seeing. And I want to see it grow. And so what we were doing was part of our service nights was that we had more and more people wanting to come to Bible study. But our house was only so big.
Mhm.
And so we decided to rent out a cafe. So we rented out a cafe. We would watch something. And after that, we would have a facilitated discussion around that. And most of that, it wasn't about me developing a sermon per se. It wasn't about me like, oh, these are the points that we need to hit and these are the types of questions we need to. But
Yeah.
for me to have enough understanding of the material to know that this could go one of 7 ways, I should probably prep for probably those 7.
Mm.
But sometimes it's just turning the question on its head and, well, what do you think about that? And letting that be okay as we discover truth together.
Mm.
So I'm a big fan, marketing, Marshall McLuhan, who coined the phrase, the medium is the message. The way in which our stuff is delivered to us matters. And it changes the method. And when it comes to Christianity, that's no different. It begins as an oral tradition, which is communally based.
Mhm.
You have to sit, you have to listen,
Yeah.
and you have to share. That is just part of that culture. Then you get into the mass printing of things, and
Yeah.
slowly it becomes into, well, there's a few people that are keepers of the sacred text, and they're the ones that are allowed to talk, and they are the only the ones that are allowed to say it to you. And then there's mass printing of the printing press, and now it's a solo thing, and I don't need anyone else.
Yeah.
And then we've gone full circle again into this classroom-like structure where we have the expert at the front and they spoon feed us what we're supposed to believe. And if we like it enough, we go there. And if we don't like it, we find one we do down the street. And so there isn't a lot of critical thinking. But as geeks, that's not who we are in our culture. We want to talk. We want to participate. We want to disagree. And we're okay with questions not having answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we
Yeah.
started this night where it was just a conversation about that. And I remember one in particular was really fun. It was the Futurama episode where Bender is flying through space and he has a colony that kind of populates the front half of his body, and they see him as God. And so they're interact with him, and he's trying to like help out and that sort of thing. But there's another colony on his backside that he can't reach or see, and so they feel neglected by God. And eventually, war starts. And eventually, because no resistance, he gets to the end of the universe in which he encounters a godlike being, and he has this discussion about God. And he's like, "I tried to help, and people hated me. I didn't help and people hated me." And it ended by them just all killing each other. Like, how do you do this? And that godlike creature was like, the secret to being God is to make a difference, but not letting them know, not letting them see that you ever really did anything at all. And it was just this. So we talk about this. Do you like this God, and why? And there was so much of this. And I remember there was profound moments with atheists in these conversations of who were very, very adamant about their atheism. And they're like, actually, I don't like this. I do like the God in which one is fair, where either everybody dies or nobody dies. Right? Like the God that Christians describe is not a fair God, and I don't like that God. I want a God that is fair and consistent, and I don't see that. And there's just this moment of even Christians are like, I feel that deep down too.
Yeah.
That my God doesn't always feel fair. And so there were these moments of discussion and true journey to discovering truths about our own faith. And so it eventually grew past the cafe and said, we need a church. I didn't want to. I never set out to plant a church, but this gentleman who flew in from Saskatchewan was like, I think you need to plant a church. And I think this is a terrible idea. I hate this idea. And so he's like, okay, I want to fly you and your wife out to Toronto. We've got a church planting conference going on. I just want you to attend, and we'll see where it goes. Like, okay. And it was fun. Like the whole first day was like, these are the things you do to plant a church. And we had done all of those things already. And then it was the second day of like, what do you do next? And it was weird because we're in this group of people and I'm the only one that doesn't want to plant a church, but I'm further along the journey of planting a church than anyone else in the room. And so it was a fun moment of like, I think we do need to, and I think we need to figure out what this looks like. And part of what convinced me was this feeling like an outsider in somebody else's space. And so as geeks, he's like, when was the last time you went to one in your community's wedding? And he's like, and I explained a story of my goddaughter, and they changed the church up, and there was a little bit of like some Star Wars and some Marvel references, and it was really fun. And he's like, yeah, like you had to change it up, but did it feel like your home? And I'm just quiet, and he says, now, what if somebody in your community dies? What happens? It's like, I'm betting if they go to another church or if their family goes to another church, the funeral's there. And they talk about the things that they know about them. But the truth of who they truly were, where they came most alive, was in your community. And your voice is not heard in that funeral. Because your community does not have a home of their own. You need to plant a church. And I'm like, okay. and so we did, and it's centered around this idea of story. So we call it the hearth, sitting around the hearth telling a story.
Nice.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And so, I mean, we have COVID. We used to rent out a large cafe. We partnered with our church. They had this beautiful space, and we would maybe watch something, but it would be a discussion. It isn't about one person bringing all of the answers, but it's about, all right, here's the passage. Here's where it comes from. Here's some context that I know because, maybe I'm educated or whatever. And he's like, now, what do you think about this? How do you reconcile this with this? Go. And then people just start talking.
Nice.
And sometimes there's like weaving of conversations, bringing ones in, bringing them back. And with Zoom, it's really fun because there's always two conversations going on. There's the verbal and there's the text. And it's really fun to interact with because it is a communal event. It isn't one that is witnessed. It is one that is participated in.
Yeah.
And so that's our church. And just this past February, I actually stepped down. So I am not the pastor of the church anymore. And that was just life, and everything was crazy. And I needed a sabbatical. I've been doing it for 10 years, and I took a sabbatical and said, like when I took my sabbatical, I felt like at least I was running everything. I was doing everything. My hands were in everything. I was so busy. I was tired. I was exhausted. And so when I took a year away, so many others stepped up and built it into something of their own. I'm like, I don't want to change that.
Yeah.
I'm still going to the church because I love every moment of it, but I'm like, this is a unique thing on its own that has grown beyond me, and I'm good with that. So that's our church. The hearth.
Beautiful.
That's really beautiful.
And the true calls are always resisted at some point. So your story doesn't surprise me, but it sounds like.
Go ahead.
No, it sounds like you did exactly what the Spirit was leading you to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like when you find yourself like knee deep in something you did not plan, that's when you have a calling. That's really good. Man, this has been a fantastic episode. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Kyle, thank you so much for coming in. Where can people find you? Where can they find the Thy Geekdom Come books and learn more about all the stuff you're doing?
Well, to find Thy Geekdom Come, really simple, geekdevo.com. We picked up the URL, it forwards it right to where you need to go. That's the easiest way to find us. But there are some other things that I think are worth mentioning, like Mythos and Ink. We love story. Like our tagline is we're for geeks by geeks, and if you are a geek and you love telling story, then we want you to be a part of our community too. So we work on writing. We have a world building podcast. We are currently talking about the Shadow and Bone series, which we're really excited about on Netflix. We have a Discord community that works around writers. We have courses just to help people tell better stories so that they can make a difference with the stories that they tell. That's us. Mythosink.com.
Outstanding. That's great.
Mythosandink.com.
Both will go. Mythosandink.com and mythosink.com. Both go to the same place.
Gotcha. Cool. Fantastic.
See, tech guy. I can do these things.
Very nice. Very nice. That's good. Well, Kyle, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. Appreciate you coming out, and we wish you well in all you do. We're certainly in your corner, and thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Okay.
Thank you, Kyle.
Take care.
All right. Live long and prosper, sir.
You too, my friend. You too.
All right. One of these days, I'm going to get like a sound effect. I mean, I have them, but I don't use them.
Yeah.
Because I don't own them, but a sound effect of like a beam out.
Yeah, there's got to be like some
doors closing.
some royalty-free equivalent of a transporter sound.
People, but people do that all the time. In these things where they beam the guest and beat the guest out. But Kyle has beamed out, and we really appreciate him being here. That was fantastic, and went places I didn't plan or expect. So because like we always say, tightly scripted this show is. Yeah. So I think we should probably. Do we have an audience question?
We do, and it's a fascinating audience question.
Well, let's get into it then.
So the audience question is this: can you match Star Trek characters with different dinosaurs? The person even added, "Yes, that is a serious listener question." So,
well,
I'm not sure where the questioner's going with this, if anywhere, maybe. But hey,
I'm not sure why they feel they have to justify that as a serious listener question, because I think on the face of it, it's serious.
It's the kind of thought exercise we love to do, right?
on the three-horned face of it.
Yes, indeed.
Which would be what Triceratops means in Greek. Okay.
That is absolutely correct.
So, okay.
So how about we do this? How about I just name some characters from Star Trek, from the various series, and we'll see what you have in mind.
So you're gonna quiz me. You're gonna do the character, and I'll give them a dino identity.
There you go. Well, quiz implies there's a right answer. I mean, this is get the creative juices flowing here. So we got to start with Captain James T. Kirk. Who is his dinosaur equivalent?
What is his dinosaur equivalent? Oh, he's got to be the T-Rex, because I feel like
the T-Rex.
I think the T-Rex because the way the T-Rex is marketed anyway is the T-Rex is most proud of itself.
Yep.
Because Rex means king, right? And
right.
Kirk's pretty much, I mean, we think of him as kind of arrogant and cocky, and I mean, okay, he is. But he also has a humility, he has humility and all that later on as he gets older and all that sort of thing. But I mean, I think honestly, like the most classic dinosaur goes with the most classic Star Trek captain.
I can see that. At least he's got better arms than a T-Rex has.
Yes,
but I can see. Okay,
and he likes to show them off when his shirt gets ripped.
Well, let's finish out the iconic trio from TOS: Spock and McCoy. Dino equivalents for Spock and McCoy.
McCoy. I'm going to go with McCoy first. Leonard Bones McCoy is going to be. I'm just kind of leaning toward Dilophosaurus.
Now, which one is that?
Dilophosaurus, I mean, like in Jurassic Park, it's the one that spits and has the frills.
But
real Dilophosauri did not have the frills or spit, as far as we know.
You mean Spielberg lied to us?
Oh yes, Spielberg.
Next thing you're going to know, you're telling me there's no ET either.
Hey, and that's right. And I'm not going to tell you that because I don't want to ruin your childhood. But but don't let Stan Winston off the hook. He lied to us too, and Dennis Muren, the whole lot of them, liars. Yeah, I'm going toward Dilophosaurus, and I'm not entirely sure why. I think because, like all people who grew up in our generation, dinosaurs are defined by Jurassic Park. So when I think about dinosaurs, I just go down the rank of Jurassic Park dinosaurs. But yeah, Dilophosaurus. I don't know why. I think they just have that sort of, it's that approachable but yet still kind of snarly look
Yeah.
that they have.
And if
Something
they
like that.
did spit, McCoy could come out with some acidic remarks when he would want to.
He
So,
could.
you know, I thought
And
that's where you were going, maybe.
That's good. I like that. And also D. Kelly used to do westerns. So you just think
Okay.
of him just like stereotypically, he never did this in any of the movies, but stereotypically hitting a spittoon.
I could totally see Dr. McCoy doing that.
He would
if
do
they
it. You
used
know.
chewing tobacco in Starfleet, he would be filling up the spittoons on the Enterprise.
It would be Bones and Scotty. They would be the two who'd be able to nail it, and it would just be a competition between them the whole time.
We're going with that for Bones.
We're going to redo Star Trek as a pure Western, but go ahead.
We're going with that for Bones, but every McCoy has to have his Spock. So
Spock.
Who's the Dino Spock?
The Dino Spock. And
I mean Leonard Nimoy Spock here. Nothing against the other Spocks, but I want a Dino Spock for the original.
I'm actually thinking that Spock would best be.
How's this? Let me.
Okay, I'm thinking about this. This is a stretch, okay, but I'm actually thinking of Ultrasaurus, which is this sauropod who has this super tall neck. It's like a Brachiosaurus, but the neck is like twice as tall. They're huge. Like we went with my son to this place called Dinosaur World in Glen Rose, Texas, and they have all these life-size models, life-size recreations of dinosaurs, like out in this place where you walk through the trail, and all these life-size dinosaurs are all around you. And there's plaques telling you about them. The Ultrasaurus is the biggest thing I've ever seen in my life in terms of like animals. Like it's huge. It's like 3 stories high or something. And so the reason I picked that is because I kind of thought I'd go with a sauropod for him. Well, I thought I'd at least go with an herbivore for him because he doesn't eat meat, right? But also, like, he paces himself. He's not in a hurry, right? And then also, so he's thoughtful. I mean, yes, granted, sauropods had tiny, tiny brains, but we're just going with personality here, okay? So you think of a sauropod as taking their time, but then the Ultrasaurus, I thought particularly because the Ultrasaurus is taller than all the rest of them, so he can see. I'm saying he because we're talking about Spock,
right?
He can see over top of everything.
Yeah,
right? That's that logic where he looks over above what everybody else is seeing and looks at the lay of the land.
I like it.
The logical choice is this.
I like it.
Spock's
Okay.
Ultrasaurus.
Okay.
Right.
Well, let's skip ahead to the next generation. Let's do a couple from TNG. Mr. Worf.
Worf's got to be a ceratopsian of some sort. You want to just go with Triceratops because
yes, I could
that's
see
the most common. There are others. There's so many ceratopsians, and they have like all these cool horns and stuff. And if it was a few years ago, I could tell you more about a different one. But there's one that was found recently, and like its skull was sticking out of like where this waterfall was falling or something. And the skull was just protruding out. And it was this whole new species of ceratopsian. It's like Regio something. I can't remember the name of it. That's the one I would pick because it's like the coolest looking one. But the reason you would do that, I mean, obviously you're looking at physical appearance, right? And you get the Worf turtle head. But also, these folks are like, they're low to the ground, right? They're serious. They mean business. You don't want to mess with them. They're herbivores, so they're peaceful, like generally in their general demeanor, which Worf is.
Yeah.
But you don't want to come against them because they will undo you. That's
yes.
And that's Worf.
Yeah.
So there you go.
How about Deanna Troi as a dinosaur?
Deannosaurus. Deannosaurus Troix.
Who's the most empathic dinosaur?
Oh man, see, I've got one I want to say, but I think it's better for Beverly Crusher. So let's go. Deanna Troy is gonna be, I see her as like an oviraptor. Like they're known as egg stealers. That's why their name is oviraptor, because it has the ova for the egg in there,
Uh-huh.
right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But they didn't actually do that. We think that's actually not how they operated. That's newer research is showing us that may not be how they existed. It's just, you know. But the oviraptor is lithe and has sort of a beauty all its own. And I get that they could have been a very sensitive creatures, very perceptive
Okay,
creatures.
yes.
Because to be that size, right, and to be that stealth and that lithe and that like agile, they probably had to be very sensitive to their surroundings, have really good proprioception, and I think Deanna Troy could be an oviraptor.
I'll buy it. I'll buy it.
All right.
Which one did you have in mind for Dr. Crusher?
I was hoping you were going to ask that. So there's a dinosaur, and I'm just saying this just because I think it fits her character pretty well. There's a dinosaur called Myosaurus, and they are known as the good mother dinosaur.
Mm.
And
Well,
again, just like with,
that seems a perfect fit then.
that
Yeah.
seems a perfect fit. Just like with Oviraptor, that's obviously based on like some coincidental stuff about how their skeletons were found, how their bones were found. But they're called the good mother. And I really like the Myosaur because they have this really pretty face and just really, they're like majestic, right?
Yeah.
But they're calm and cool and centered. And you can just think of them as a dinosaur that might be a doctor because they look intelligent, but beautiful, but like noble, but nurturing. They have all that stuff. And I think that would be Deanna. I mean, Beverly.
Beverly, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Jadzia Dax, Deep Space Nine.
Oh, Jadzia. Jeez.
Are there any dinosaurs that have a symbiont nestled inside their belly?
That's the question. Like which dinosaur looks like it has 7 latent personalities? That's the question you're asking me. And I don't know them that intimately. So,
I'm you know a lot more about I'm impressed how much you know about dinosaurs.
Thank you.
Honestly, I don't know that much.
This comes from paying attention while educating my son about dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Well, he still loves dinosaurs, but he was way into them several years ago. But let's see. Jadzia is very intelligent, but also playful. She's very determined. She's got a lot of variety to herself, obviously. Man, I don't know. Jadzia is a hard one. That's a really hard one to do. I'm gonna say okay. All right, this is gonna sound weird, but here's what I'm gonna go with Jadzia. I think Jadzia is going to be more of a Deinonychus. Now, Deinonychus, you want to know what that dinosaur is? Think of a velociraptor from Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
That's a Deinonychus.
Like you've already told me Jurassic Park is a pack of lies, so can I trust you on this?
Lied to you so many times I can't even tell you. Yes, the basically when they were making the velociraptors for Jurassic Park, they're like, velociraptors are cool and stuff, but like, what if they were basically Deinonychus? Because we like Deinonychus better, and they basically made the dinosaurs Deinonychus.
Okay.
So now
what's the connection with Jadzia? Is she gonna?
So the character. Well, you think of that shot in Jurassic Park when the DNA code is reflected off the computer screen, because it wouldn't actually reflect like that, but it's reflected off the computer screen. Again, Jurassic Park lied to you.
I was going to say, you really have it out for this movie, man.
I'm telling you, what can I say? One of my favorite movies. But the DNA code is reflected on the Velociraptor's skin, much like Jadzia's marks.
Oh,
Hand
nice. I
drawn
see.
by Mike Westmore every episode, signed, initialed and signed, up like down where you can't see it, by Mike Westmore, and numbered every
Yes,
episode.
you're right.
But with magic marker, I think it was. But anyway, it was magic marker, something like that. Anyway, no, so I'm joking about that. But I'm
Oh.
just thinking, and like you can't go with the depiction that's in Jurassic Park of because they're kind of the villains and also the heroes you get to Jurassic World and all that. But Jadzia, and again, like Blue has similar marks. Blue in
That's
Jurassic
true.
World,
That's true.
similar markings to Jadzia. So maybe that's it. It really is more of an aesthetic thing for me. That just something about her character, that strength, right? That that perception. They seem to be really intelligent dinosaurs, and I think that's why I'm drawn to that sort of theropod. Much like with the Oviraptor for Deanna, it's just that intelligence and strength and agility, and just
Okay. Well, how about one more? I really am
One more.
honestly impressed by how much you know. I mean, I remember a few things from grade school about dinosaurs, and obviously what I saw in Jurassic Park, which I can
Right.
no longer believe.
You can't believe anything in Jurassic Park.
Okay, we're going to do one from Discovery to wrap things up. Saru. Who would Saru be as a dinosaur?
Saru already is a dinosaur. I don't know if you've noticed this.
What now?
He's a dinosaur. Just look, you rearrange the letters in his name and it says Saur. S-A-U-R. Come on. Look at that face. Kelpians are dinosaurs, man. I don't know what
See
you're
that
talking
one you were
about.
talking about
He
with a
has
long
hooves,
neck
for
and the
goodness
grays
sake.
moving gracefully. I thought maybe that would be if you hadn't already used it for Spock.
Right. What would be a good dinosaur for Saru? Saru. That's hard. Man, you're giving me really hard ones. Are there easy ones? That's the question. I don't know.
I don't know. Here's a reverse. Just one of these that I've been wondering, because I thought you might have picked it from McCoy. One dinosaur I do remember is the Ankylosaurus. Does it belong to that family you were talking about earlier? That's down low to the ground and got all the horns and
it's similar, but it's not a ceratopsian. But
okay. Because Ankylosaurus is one I remember being very impressed with. Maybe I'd make it a Klingon character. There is
a whole family of ankylosaurs. It's basically that's like a family group. Okay, so kind of like sauropods or whatever.
Yeah, okay.
Ankylosaurs, and there's a lot of different species of them. But the one you think of most is that one with the club tail.
That's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Tail. Which immediately for me means that should actually be Tasha Yar from Code of Honor, because she had that thing. She had that thing on her hand she was supposed to fight with.
Oh my gosh! I wasn't expecting to think about Code of Honor.
You can't come in the direction.
Excuse me.
That's the Star Trek connection I make.
Okay, you win.
But also, more seriously, you think of the Ankylosaurus. And the Ankylosaurus has spikes like all over, like even on its ankles, right?
Yeah.
It's got that club tail, it's got spikes on its head. It's all about self-protection. And that's actually Tasha's character. Like her entire character is built around self-defense. That's her whole thing. So yeah, Ankylosaur totally Tasha Yar, absolutely. Yeah.
Man. Okay. I think you have more than admirably answered this listener's question. And I feel like you could go on even further.
I
if you
could
wanted
go on for
to.
a while. Like Jean-Luc Picard, he might be a Pachycephalosaurus. Pachycephalosaurus is ones with like the dome head. Like
I can see it.
Gotta go with that.
Yes.
Strength and the leadership, whatever. You know, Pachycephalosaurus. But I didn't answer the other one, which was Saru.
Oh, right.
Saru actually looks like a Pachycephalosaurus too.
Yeah.
I know what Saru is. Saru is a Parasaurolophus. Parasaurolophus, if you remember in Jurassic Park, I know you always have to go back to Jurassic Park, even though it lied to you every step of the way. A Pachycephalosaurus of lies. But it because there's the Pachycephalosaurus in the second movie. But when you look out over the water, you know, and the apatosaur or the apatosauruses are there, and they're, you know, lifting their heads, and they're those creatures going into the water, and they have those sort of swoop back horn looking things on their heads, right? They're halfway between a theropod. They're like halfway between a theropod and a sauropod, you know. Like, what is this? Those are Parasaurolophus, okay? And the cool thing about Parasaurolophus is they can raise up on their hind legs, right? And that reminds me of Saru with his height.
Yes.
But also they have a sort of gentleness about them. But again, you don't want to mess with them. But we also think that those big horn-like protrusions on their heads, they might have actually used to make sounds.
Yeah, I do remember that.
They're like it's like a big nose on their head, basically. And they could have made a sound through that. And I feel like that musical quality, you know, or that sonorous quality sort of connects with Saru's nature, that sort of spiritual nature that Saru has. And so I get that musical quality from him. And so I would say he's a Parasaurolophus. There you go.
Well done, sir. Well done.
Thank you.
And even though you've decimated my faith in Jurassic Park,
as was my intention.
Well, number one, it's better to know the truth than to not know the truth, and number two, it has nothing to do with John Williams' magnificent score for that movie. So
that's right.
So you have shown that, like life, Trek finds a way.
Trek does find a way. That's absolutely right. Fantastic. Well, thank you for that question. Please keep those questions coming. As you can see, no question is too off the wall for us. And also, you know, we're going a little long on this episode because we missed you last week. So there you have it. We turned into a dinosaur episode after all.
Behemoth
Mike,
of an episode.
It's behemoth of an episode. That's right. We're Leviathan.
We're Leviathan.
Job 41. Look it up. Dinosaurs in the Bible. Possibly. Okay. So, Mike, I'm going to ask you a question now. What do we got coming up next week?
Next week, you and Tim Van Orden will be talking about Benjamin Sisko as a Christ figure.
Now, hold on, sir. That's exactly what you said last time we talked.
Well, as I told you at the beginning of the episode, you're stuck in a causal time loop with me.
Man!
So the only way you can get out is to actually make it happen next week.
Otherwise,
and avoid the destruction of the Enterprise.
Yeah, the Enterprise will blow up again. We need Enterprise blowing up sound. Yeah. All right, good.
I'll seed mysterious number 3 throughout the episode, and that'll remind you to talk about the third Christ figure in your Eastertide series. Oh, and by the way,
that's right. Yes, sir.
May 22nd, or is it May 23rd? I don't know. One of those 2 days is Pentecost. I didn't know it a few weeks ago, but I looked it up. And so you still got plenty of Easter season to finish our Christ figure series.
Awesome. That's great. I appreciate that reaffirmation. And I hope everyone will join us next week. That's fantastic. In the meantime, please like, rate, share, comment, and subscribe wherever you can do that. And also, please send us your questions. Gospel According to Star Trek on Twitter and Facebook, or gospeltrekpodcast@gmail.com. Oh, we're also on Instagram. Don't forget to look for us there. We would love to discuss your question on the show. Also, you can now sponsor us on Patreon. That's a really cool place to go, and you can get all kinds of cool perks, and your support really helps this show. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time.
I'm Mike Poteet.
And I'm Kevin C. Neese. And as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper.
See you next time.